Guess we're all here. I'm Alan Ohnsman, senior editor at Forbes. I write a lot about clean tech and advanced transportation. I've been covering the autonomy space for over a decade now. This panel, I think, is an interesting one because we're really looking at, where things stand at this point in terms of market readiness. What are some of the remaining hurdles to be overcome, both in autonomy for robotaxi, for delivery, automated delivery, a whole range of applications. And we have an interesting range of folks participating today who all have a different piece of this emerging industry. And I think I'd like to start with everyone going to my left. Aaron, can you kick things off and talk a little bit about what you're doing?
Aaron from Robot is together Robotis. We are based in Korea, but coming to explore the market here in North America and focusing on the AI-enabled robot arm into the delivery robot. So both indoor and outdoor application, that's what we are presenting. And of course, don't be limited by what you see. We've been making robots like humanoid, bipedals for the 25 years. So we are here to explore any other opportunities together if you can identify any good use cases together.
Awesome. John Miller, I'm the Chief Business Officer at Nexar. First, are Harry and Jonah here? I just want to thank them for putting on another really amazing event. I'll just give a quick overview of Nexar for those that aren't familiar. Nexar was founded in 2015 with a thesis. If you could remember, 2015, we were at a time where autonomous vehicles were 2-3 years away from being deployed. And you could remember seeing survey vehicles, test vehicles with the big LiDAR sensors and equipment driving around collecting data. And the Nexar founders had a thesis that was never going to be a scalable way to collect data and train these models at scale. And so what they ultimately decided to do was to build a very large network of AI-connected dash cams that are used for two main purposes. One, these dash cams are sold to rideshare drivers, gig workers, delivery drivers, truck drivers, fleets, and they provide them phenomenal safety benefits. But what they also do is they provide us with data intelligence around what's happening in the physical world at an incredible scale. And so 10 years later, we have the second largest data lake of road-specific data next to Tesla, with over 350,000 vehicles on the road. And all of these vehicles have AI models that are essentially able to detect and understand and process and anonymize when something of relevance to the industry happens. So when there's a work zone, or when there's a crash, or when there's a deer that hops across the road in the middle of the night, our AI models are detecting all of these things, and the data is then used to ultimately provide services across the entire industry. So we had a really exciting launch yesterday that I want to share more about in a little bit. But for now, I've already gone way over my introduction time.
Hi, my name is Ashwini Anburajan. I'm the CEO of Obi. Please take a hat or a report. They're on the seats next to you. We're a rideshare app aggregator. So it's a consumer app. You can download it, and we aggregate pricing. In addition to that, we have a pretty robust data business that is focused on really understanding price per mile, price per minute, and the pricing data that you've seen in the market around how much a Waymo costs, how much a Tesla costs, does it go up or down, really comes from all of our research. The other thing that we do and focuses on consumer behavior associated with AVs. We have a deep and robust group of 1.4 million rideshare users. They're mostly super users in terms of the number of rides they take, and their attitudes towards AVs and some of the general public interest surveying that we've done is something I'm excited to share today.
Hi everyone, my name is Pat Tsen. I am from the California Public Utilities Commission. I am the Deputy Executive Director over Consumer Policy, Transportation, and Enforcement at the Commission. So the CPUC's space within this industry is that we regulate passenger service. So if you provide fared passenger service in the state, it is regulated by the commission. So that includes traditional modes of service like limousines, tour buses, excluding taxis. And then it expanded into transportation network like Uber and Lyft about 12 years ago, and more recently into autonomous vehicles being used for passenger service in California. We work closely with our counterparts at the federal level as well as the DMV in California to set up the regulatory framework for passenger service to occur in California. Thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone. Phil Pierce with Zoox, and I lead our city public policy team. If you don't know about Zoox, we are a fully integrated, purpose-built vehicle company running autonomous vehicles. We have done over 400,000 rides in Vegas and San Francisco via the Zoox app over the last few months, and over 2 million fully autonomous miles during those trips. And we're really excited to be here and about the expansion of Zoox over the months and years to come.
Phillip, I want to kind of open things up with you. Right now, we're in an interesting period where Waymo, they're rolling around outside now, has demonstrated this can be done safely in commercial application. Zoox is sort of, with this group of companies that are getting ready to launch. You're public in a couple of markets now. You're not yet charging for rides. You're awaiting, I guess, your federal approval. And of course, CPUC will have to agree to that. But where do you see things at this moment in terms of what the barriers are? You need some more federal guidelines, I guess, if you're especially doing a non-FMVSS compliant vehicle, which your bespoke model is. Are the challenges regulatory, technological, or is it really more like local sentiment and working with local officials?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think it's a little bit of all of those things. But I think there's a straightforward path ahead of us. I mean, Zoox, as you mentioned, is unique with the purpose-built vehicle. It's not designed for a human to drive it at all, and so there are some things that are a bit different than what is in the vehicle code right now. So we are working with NHTSA. We are in the final stages of an exemption process that allow us to start charging a fare, as you mentioned, and then we would go through in California, the state level with the DMV and the CPUC. So I think there's a pathway in the U.S. and a pathway in most states. I will say, as we start to look at other states, not every state has a clear pathway, and also there's a lot of different ways that the regulatory environment looks depending on where you are. And so I do think that, as the industry matures and as the regulatory environment matures, there should be a little more parity across states. So there's not sort of this patchwork across cities or across states, so there can be clear guidelines and understanding. And California, for example, has a really robust but mature and thoughtful structure, and so there's a lot, I think, for folks to learn about how to create that pathway. And I don't think you would invest in a place, right, if there's not a clear pathway to understand how to get on the road.
Pat, let's go back to you, since we're talking about the regulatory piece, and that's your role here today. Currently, I guess Waymo is the only company that is certified or has the approval to do paid rides.
Yeah.
Zoox has approval to pick up people but just not charge at this point. Is that basically it?
Right.
What do you see as the additional pieces that need to happen at the federal level and maybe from other states to sort of, have a more harmonized system of approval?
I would say that in terms of coordination, that has improved over the last couple of years. We now have regular interaction with NHTSA and even with NTSB in terms of their ongoing monitoring and some of the investigations that occurs when incidents occur. There's a lot of back and forth that happens when an incident is reported. We know who to call and what department is going to be needed to be involved. That wasn't necessarily in place a couple of years ago. And over time, I would anticipate that sort of the industry is consolidating. So just less than 2 years ago, we had probably over 24 testing permits active in California. And that number has greatly reduced in the last couple of years. And I think that's just sort of a function of the industry sort of working itself out and identifying what is feasible in terms of operations. We most recently sort of participated on a information exchange that was hosted by NHTSA that invited all of the various state regulators to participate and to make introductions, to share our lessons learned with the other states. So my hope would be that as more of these types of information exchange and collaboration happens, that that type of consistency is improved.
If there is, the DOT has announced plans to create guidelines for autonomous vehicles and for, non-FMVSS compliant vehicles, but it hasn't actually happened yet. At the point at which there is some federal policy, where does that end? And CPUC and California DMV, for example, where does your authority begin, and where does the federal policy end if we actually get guidelines?
So I think I sort of look at it from the perspective of how cars are regulated, right? NHTSA continues to be responsible to determine if a car manufacturer is allowed to be sold in the United States. But it is the DMV of each respective state that has the operations piece that's in the state. So you're ensuring the safe operation of those vehicles on the roads in that state. And the California PUC and other sort of passenger oversight agencies continue to conduct the same type of regulatory overview of ensuring safety of those operations in those states. So we know that there is legislation that is going through the federal legislature, and we're monitoring and also working very closely to look at and really stress the importance of certain aspects of that regulation remaining at the state level versus completely with the federal government.
And not to keep dumping on you, but I have one very simple question, which is, again, we have companies that have been filing their data with California DMV, talking directly with CPUC to get their permits as needed, giving all kinds of autonomous driving data to the state. Zoox has done it, Waymo's done it, several other companies have done it. There is a company that shall remain nameless that is talking about launching robotaxi service, to the best of my, and they're currently operating in the Bay Area with human monitored vehicles. Does CPUC look favorably upon a company that makes public announcements but then doesn't actually provide hard data to the state to evaluate what they're doing?
So the autonomous vehicle passenger service in California is defined by statute. And the vehicle code specifically says that it is SAE level 3 and above that is subject to autonomous vehicle regulations. So the company that you're referring to has declared itself to be level 2. And so that is something that is actually, we most recently released a scoping memo in our new autonomous vehicle rulemaking at the CPUC. And one of the issues that has been scoped in is potential data reporting requirements for level 2 type of vehicles that are being used in passenger operations. So we are constantly monitoring how the industry is evolving and how we can ensure passenger safety while also encouraging innovation.
Ashwini, I think you're in an interesting position as a ride aggregator at this point, because you're seeing a lot of the data. And right now, that's primarily from Lyft and Uber and the different ride services. Are you currently beginning to get information on, say, Waymo in the markets where that service is available, where other companies are testing? Talk a little bit about what you're beginning to see from the feedback.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and Jonah and Harry especially for putting on this great event. You can see some of our research in the reports that we've laid out. And it looks at two sets of things, right? Especially pricing really matters in this market. How much does the ride cost? Is it affordable? Is it something that people want to repeat behavior and take? So I'll give you an example. We put Waymo in the app, a few months ago, about 6-7 months ago, maybe a year ago. And it was actually, it was a full year ago, guys, sorry. And we put out a pricing report soon after. But immediately, everyone took the ride. Everyone took the ride because it was like just sort of distributing it. It was comparing the pricing. It put it top of mind. Now, Waymo has fallen behind because it's for rideshare users that are consistently using rideshare who care about price. Waymo's not a competitor among them, right? Like you're not necessarily going to pick the Waymo. You're also not going to pick the Waymo necessarily if you're in a rush or if you're going to go to the airport or for all of these reasons. Behavior is really context dependent on your willingness to take the car. And I've often said, well, our research shows that once people take a Waymo, they strongly prefer it to the experience without a driver. But women don't take a lot of these cars. And our research has found that only 46% of women, after they've taken the car ride, say they would trust a Waymo to pick up their child or transport an elderly relative. And when we talk about safety, the safety is two sets of things, right? I think there's safety in the idea that you're safe in the car and you're gonna get from point A to point B in a great way. There's safety for women also in my relationship with the person who is driving me. And that's something that we've talked about a lot. And people are like, why aren't women taking more Waymos? Why aren't they taking more Waymos? Like, why aren't they jumping in the car? Well, I'll give you an example this morning with my Waymo ride where I was pretty upset because I took the Waymo and I was like, I shouldn't take the Waymo because I'm late and I'm in a little bit of a rush, but it says it was gonna come in a minute. It ended up parking like really far away. I had to like run across traffic to go get it in time. And I cross the street, jump in the Waymo, we go. We drive through downtown LA. There's a lot of homeless encampments. There's a lot of people on the street. Two guys are suddenly like, as we cross the red light, we're crossing and there are two guys there and there's a dog and they're arguing. Maybe they're arguing about the dog, I don't know. But they're fighting and they're fighting a lot. So the car stops. And then everything and then there's no one actually behind us, which was interesting. But the car stopped moving, like a minute or two go by. I actually like made a little video of it. And then they see the car, this guy wants to cross, he comes over and he like that. And then he's holding it and he's not moving. And then I am scared. And you're in this like freeze mode. And I was just like, fuck. What do you do? Sorry for like square. But like, what am I supposed to do right now? Like, I was like, what do I do? Like, and I wasn't thinking, right? Because to be honest, like I live in New York. I'm not in a Waymo a lot. So it didn't occur to me, Caroline, our PR person was like, you should have pressed the support button. And I didn't think about pressing the support button. So then I'm like, I have to talk to the guys. Normally the driver would do that for you. Yeah. So I lowered the thing, I stick my head, I'm like, hey guys, please, can you let me go? Like, blah, blah, I'm late. Like, and so they were like, they were nice. They moved out of the way. Car keeps going. Car's confused. Car drives me into some alleyway. Pickup truck is parked, blocking the alleyway. Car stops again. Finally, I was like, okay, I'm walking. So I get out, and I was like, please close the door. Please close the door. And I was like, this ride is over. I don't know how to tell the car, but I'm talking to the car because there's nobody else to talk to. The ride is over. I'm like, I'm leaving. Grab my stuff, slam the door, walk to Curvivore. And that's the example of like safety. When we think about safety, we have to think about safety in these multiple categories. What is my perception of being in a car? Is that car gonna get me there? Is there gonna be interference in the car? Do I trust this car if, for example, I'm driving through a city street and Someone wants to block the car, someone wants to hit the car. Like we talk about people beating up the robots. But that was sort of a similar example. Luckily, like I could be a human that could like stick my head out the window and do that. But there are women and there are people that maybe don't feel safe doing that. And then what do? You're just sitting inside waiting, right? And I think like that's where OB provides value, because we're thinking about what is the experience of it being like to be in a car, to be a rideshare user, to get going. And I'll give you a little thing that I've been thinking about a lot. I've been thinking about a lot how Uber bought Blacklane and Lyft bought a company called TBR Chauffeuring. They're making heavy moves into the luxury industry. Why are they doing that? Why would they spend $1 billion buying Blacklane if they truly believed AB was going to be like the only thing that people were taking, right? So I think like for me, as I think about the industry, there's like a context on when I want to take a ride and whether I want to be with the driver or not. And what is that driver going to do for me, et cetera. Like we've talked, there's been obviously a lot of safety issues with drivers, but mostly like I would say like this is a safe experience getting from point A to point B. You've all taken like, and you've all had experiences with drivers in the car. Overall, I think it's safe. Overall, I think it's like an incredible experience. And I actually deeply regret saying that people just don't want to have a driver in the car. Like I want a driver in the car now, depending on the context I want to go in. And the next time I'm really late, I'm not going to be calling Waymo, right? So that's what I would
Well,
say.
that's a great. I mean, there's an edge case for you that you've just. I mean, that's an interesting one. It's very real. I haven't
Yeah.
heard that specific type of incident before with the Waymo. Phillip, do you want to pinch hit for the robotaxi industry? What would Zoox's fix be for what she went through?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the comment for sure, and I'm certainly not here to do anything for Waymo, although I do take Waymos regularly, and they're very nice.
Usually they're very nice. They're very nice.
Totally, but I think that's right. One of the things that you were mentioning was like, what is safety and what is perceived safety, and also what are things like now and what are they going to be like in the years to come. And so I do think, Zoox has tried to be really thoughtful. We've tried to be really transparent with regulators, really open. We've tried to scale in a way that, it goes from tiny, small, medium, large to make it so people can get comfortable both in a city, but also as riders. What use case makes the most sense for them, right? It may not always be the right choice. But I think also our purpose-built vehicle has allowed us to do some interesting things. For example, automatic, subway-style sliding doors that open and close nicely. Like, at the end of the ride, if a door gets left open, the Zoox vehicle is going to automatically close it. We also have one-way audio on the front and rear of our vehicles where we can play messages maybe to someone that is disturbing the ride, or to a first responder if we're near an emergency scene and we want to help communicate to them, hey, we're watching, we know what's going on, you don't need to worry about us, we have a human in the loop right now, and if you want to talk to us, then they can come over to the vehicle. On the outside, we also have a camera, a speaker, and a microphone that goes directly to our Zoox Fusion Center, as we call it, where we have our teleoperators, teleguidance folks that can give additional instructions to the vehicle based on what that first responder is saying right at the vehicle. That would also work for two-way outside of the vehicle with a user or someone else on the street. So I think some of that stuff, to your point, sometimes a human is important, right? I think that having those levels of most of this is an autonomous vehicle, it's a delightful thing, but there are times where you really do need a person to either make you feel safe or to help out with what's going on. So I think that that's an interesting balance.
Or a reminder around that there is like a security support. Like you can press support, you can call. Like it was totally out of mind that I could do that. Like even a reminder when you get in the car, hey, if you're suddenly something happens, you're not comfortable, you can press the support button, right? Like I forgot, like that. I don't remember them saying that. And in that moment, it didn't occur to me that I could just like get help. I need a big red button. Because it's like when you don't put the seatbelt on, it's just like beeping like crazy, the car. It's so interesting to me that there's like a delayed response around potentially like how the support gets called for the car.
John, this is a good opening, I guess, for Nexar. How can you help solve, maybe not this specific case, but some of the tools that you can provide and the types of data that you're able to provide companies as their services scale?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to connect a couple of the dots that we're talking about here. One around a standardized framework from a regulatory perspective, and then another from a public trust perspective when it comes to AVs. I will say today and this week in general it's a full circle moment for me. The reason it's a full circle moment is Nexar had a massive launch this week, and I'm going to talk about it in a second, but literally just a year ago, I think I sat in this exact same chair, and I talked about the idea of an AV driver's license. What does this mean? Thinking about it from my use case as somebody who lives in New York City, I don't own a car, I rely on public transportation, I take Uber and Lyft. Why am I comfortable getting into an Uber or a Lyft? I don't really think about it, but at the end of the day, I do it because I know that the driver has taken a driver's test and they have a driver's license. And most likely 99% of the other drivers on the road have also passed a driver's license, or also have a driver's license. When we think about AVs, we're getting there slowly, but we're still in the era where there's 2, 4, maybe 10 players that are competing for the market, and it's still very small relative to the automotive market at large. Hopefully, in short order, we're going to have, it's not going to be an Uber and Lyft situation, and we're going to have 30 of these AV companies, 50 of these AV companies, 100 of them, and some of them you might not even know who the technology is being operated by. And so the public needs to trust that when they get into an AV, it's passed some sort of standardized, robust driver's test that actually ensures that an AV is able to handle not just standard driving down the street, make a left turn in a closed testing environment, but that an AV is able to handle the scenarios where most accidents happen, which is when it's snowing and a deer juts across the road in the middle of the night. There is no mechanism today for AVs to be tested at scale against the scenarios that actually cause accidents. So what does this have to do with Nexar, and why is this a full circle moment for me? Nexar has spent the last 6 months, actually the last year, taking all of the data that we capture in a completely anonymized capacity, building our own collision anticipation model. And the way that we've built this model is completely based on human, real-world driving behavior. It's not small sets of LiDAR, high-fidelity, multi-sensor suite, simulation, typical ADAS. It's all real-world driving dashcam video data. And we launched Badass 1.0, yes, I said badass, in October. And we had incredible results in terms of Badass's ability to anticipate risk in a much more effective capacity than some of the most common publicly available benchmarks. Yesterday, we launched Badass 2.0. And Badass 2.0 is actually a product. What Badass 2.0 is being used right now already by AV developers, AV insurance companies, is they're taking this collision anticipation model and they're using it first to expose these gaps in that a simulation is not able to predict for. That deer hopping into the road in the middle of the night, right? Badass is able to do that because it's trained on 10 billion miles of data that has seen all of these events already. So they're exposing these gaps by running their models through Badass, and then they're comparing their models to Badass, which is the only neutral benchmark that exists in the market. And so where Nexar sees itself is at this very neutral place in the ecosystem where we're providing value to the AV developers to make their models more powerful for deployment. We are providing value to the insurance companies so that they can have a mechanism to actually underwrite risk appropriately and grow their book of business. And where we want to get to is where Badass is actually used as a tool for regulatory bodies to standardize what I'm calling a year ago in the abstract, the AV driver's test. And so it's a really proud moment. Badass 2.0, the other things about it that are really interesting, and Aaron and I were just talking about this yesterday, is it generalizes not only on a geographic basis, so it can work in Wyoming, it can work in New York City, but it also works outside of vehicles. So it works with robotics, it works with drones, it works with planes. And this is where, in order for the AV industry to really scale and get to a point where, if we really believe that AVs are safer than humans and they're going to reduce accidents, we need to move a lot faster. And getting to a point where we can scale more rapidly is critical. And so that's a little bit about Badass 2.0. We're really excited at Nexar for the launch, and I'm happy to talk about how it can apply across really any use case that's sitting here in the room today.
Aaron, you're going to kind of pinch hit, I guess, for the delivery logistics space here with the tech, because you're doing actual hardware that's going into these things. And when we spoke previously, in addition to things like the Coco robots that are delivering food, you're also looking at applications like within a building or a set structure, small robotic vehicles that can provide services within a building, that sort of thing. Talk a little bit about how that market is developing. I think what we're most familiar with would be the food delivery space, but broaden the view there.
So maybe I can speak about related to the regulation. When we first began, regulation, of course, was a bottleneck for us to expand. But luckily, we were the first company got the approval from the Korea government to be able to deploy the delivery robot outside. And at the same time, we were thinking, what if the robots can not only doing good at one thing, which is delivery, but multiply or expand the utility of robots. And that's the time when government agencies start encouraging us or identifying the potential use cases. Of course, some hospitality sectors were also asking indoor multi-floor service, and that's how we got our foot into it. So on one hand, regulation gap or limitation help us to speak more actively with the municipalities or the city councils to a point where we have done the city of Seoul asking like Tsen service in their main city hall. And that's how we start the indoor service applications. And later on, the police department start asking maybe security patrolling. And the city park approaching us, what if we can collect the trash? To now, some of the parking agencies approaching us, doing some great successful pilot. We are doing the reinforcement of the parking on the street. There are about 5,000 stations like this in the city of Seoul. So with that view, as a way to expand out the utility of our robot, at least for the North America, we are tapping into the indoor multi-floor service, having the AI-enabled manipulator with our robot to be able to operate the elevator on their own, to tagging the RFID, to even knocking the door. So we are kind of expanding with the limitation of the regulation, but helping us to expand our service more and more. So I'd like to kind of shout out any policymakers here or private sectors, anyone who like to work with us and identify the use case. Don't be limited by what you see or what we have. As of 25 years of robot makers, we can do many different stuff. So it's, I think, exciting time for me to be here, explore the potential opportunities together.
If we step away from, I mean, you just touched on this, the food delivery application, for example, and doing something like a multi-floor, robot that can deliver items within an office building. You've got to solve the thing of like pushing the elevator button, and you said knocking on the door. What does that market look like? I mean, do you have any sense of what the take rate is likely to be? Are companies interested in expanding in that space?
So right now, the limitation or the market we've been playing has been the hospitality, especially in Japan and Korea mainly. But there is definitely a demand or need, but at the same time, from the client perspective, we'll have to consider the ROI in terms of the cost and the value that customers really see the value or not. So at this time, it's a little hard to say how much they are, but we start to have more customers utilizing it. So still initial stage, but exploring just all the opportunities for now.
I guess in your case, you also don't have to deal with all of the same regulatory issues that,
That's
say,
right.
on the street you would have to.
Yes. The private sector in that regard is much easier for us to work throughout. But luckily, Korea government is really helping us with the fiscal AI, bypassing or open up the door for us. So that's one good thing that's happening in Korea for now.
John, I think you hit on something that I've been interested in for years, which is humans have to take a test. Our vision is tested, our knowledge is tested, and our physical abilities to drive are tested before we can get a driver's license. Currently for AVs, there's no real equivalent to that. Even things like, what is a bare minimum for the vision system? Camera, LiDAR, radar, maybe only, audio sensors as well. Do you see any movement in terms, if you're talking with regulatory officials, and what something like that looks like to test and validate a system and say, we believe this is safe and can be permitted?
Yeah, I think over the past 6 to 12 months, there's definitely been movement in terms of establishing a federal standard framework. I think, at least from my perspective, the approach is less so to require certain sensor suites and certain types of equipments. It should be more outcome-based. But I think a lot of it also is, from a government perspective, I don't know that they know all of the tools that are actually available to them, right? And so BADAS, for example, by the way, I forgot to tell you guys what BADAS stands for. It's beyond ADAS. We had a really great conversation with our marketing team when we decided to name it that. But it's a great example of we're not a massive company, right? And I think that there's so much tooling and there's so much data out there that should be able to enable the government to land on an outcome-based approach when it comes to enabling AV companies to deploy on the roads. And I think ultimately an outcome-based approach, that's what the AV, you can tell me if I'm wrong, the AV developers, they just want transparency on what's actually required from a performance perspective so that they can accelerate their own deployments. Whereas if everything is regulated on, regulated in a decentralized capacity, and in some states you have to have certain sensor suites, and in other states it's outcome-based, and in other states it's self-regulated, it makes it more difficult, especially for smaller AV companies, to understand where the goalposts are when it comes to being able to deploy.
I think this touches on an issue, and with Ashwini's experience with her Waymo earlier today, edge cases there's so many interesting ones that just keep cropping up. We've seen with Waymo, whether it's killing a beloved bodega cat, how it operates going by school buses. All of these things that, it's being the lab rat right now for the market because it's out there first, but everyone else is going to experience this stuff. Your experience was very specific, and it's like, yeah, how do you deal with something like that? I don't know, where do the solutions for these things come up? Because as soon as you think you've solved, the ones that have arisen, they're going to be more.
Yeah, and that's where I think, we can criticize the elephant in the room that went unnamed before, but their methods of scaling and collecting the data and being able to understand those edge cases are completely different than everybody else's in the industry, right? I'll say it just because it's tripping me up. Tesla has a fleet of millions and millions of vehicles, and so they're observing the world in real time, and they're getting exposure to the deer crossing the road in the middle of the night, or the tornado that happens once every 2 years, right? They're capturing those events, and their AI is learning how to handle those from the driver's seat. I'm not going to comment on the situation in San Francisco. That's out of my my sweet spot. But where Nexar stands to exist is we're trying to essentially provide that sort of crowdsourced data at scale in the way that Tesla's providing it for themselves, right? Because we've been able to take 10 years and 10 billion miles of observing the roads and capturing those incidents, whereas even Waymo, who's the furthest along from a deployment perspective, they've driven over 200 million miles in their entirety, right? Where Nexar is driving over 100 million miles on a monthly basis. And so when it comes to capturing edge cases and using those edge cases to train your models, the way of regional deployments at the scale that we're at right now, we're not going to be at mass market acceleration or mass market deployment for a really long time, which, again, if you believe that AVs are there to save lives, is not a good thing.
I guess to that point, I mean, you're right. The scale of the amount of data that they can harvest is profound. And yet, the ability to really pull out all those edge cases and learn from it remains an open question, whether all of that data is actually going to good use. I don't know. From Zoox's perspective, obviously, you don't have anything approaching that kind of scale with the volume of data that you can take in. I know the company from its origins was working so heavily in simulation early on, and then lots and lots of road testing. Where do you come down on that? That having this, millions of vehicles providing data versus very targeted simulation and road testing?
I think it's interesting, and I think it's a cool product and a unique name. So kudos. I think there's a few different ways to look at it. The point you were just hitting on, though, is sort of like, yes, it's a two-phase thing. What is the data? What is your exposure? But what are you doing about it, right? And I think that's actually the thing that's really hard, and that companies are taking maybe different approaches to, and is really important. I would also just say, in terms of scaling, I think that's part of it. But I also think there's a hardware side of it. There's a vehicle side of it. There's a supply chain side of it. And I think one of the things, going back to the sort of topic of the panel, is Zoox's proposition is to be fully vertically integrated, including a new manufacturing facility, a new serial production facility in California. We're super proud to build vehicles here in the US and be able to build up to 10,000 of them a year once we're at full scale, and have this sort of like same experience, these very highly tuned sensor suites. It's really great hardware and firmware that's a part of it. And so I think all of that works together, right? Are you doing certain things on certain vehicles? Are you getting exposure to lots of different elements? It's a whole system, and all of that is interconnected. There's no sort of just one piece that's the thing that's going to change or unchange it. It's really about how do you pull the whole system together.
I think we could keep going, and we're coming up on time here. Ashwini, I love the observation separate from what happened with your Waymo experience. What you're finding from consumer feedback, and also the fact that, say, Waymo, because of price, is not near the top of what people are selecting, and also for women, because it is counterintuitive. The assumption is, for women, when they think safety, I don't want to get in a car with a stranger. The robotaxi, in that sense, is going to be more appealing. You're not finding that to be the case. I guess, do you see that changing over the next few years as the services scale?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing, what we saw a year ago when we did a consumer sentiment survey was 35%, could trust the car. Now it's about 60%, so we've seen almost a double in that, in their willingness to try the car, the willingness to get in and to experience it. I think with Waymo's now, it's like a San Francisco check the box for a tourist to take a ride. And that's a good thing, because what it does is it acclimates people to the experience of being in the car. I think where I'm interested in this is the average OB user takes 30 trips at least a month. So this is a high power usage audience, right? And we have about 1.4 million users, half of which are in the United States, most of which are in LA and New York, and in major cities like San Francisco. So we're seeing Waymo usage, but fundamentally now that it's commonplace, it's becoming context dependent. Do I need to go to the airport? My personal story, am I in a rush? Or three, what's the price at this moment? And fundamentally, I truly believe these cars are going to be starting to be evaluated on price as much as they are on anything else. The consumer does not believe the car needs a tip, right? And we know that there's this theory that they're baking tips into the price. Consumer is not going to tip the car, guys. We have to understand that. And number two, when we think about price, it really is there's so much love and work that has gone into building these AVs, and I don't want to diminish that by saying that rideshare is a commodity, but it's a commodity. Whether you take Lyft, whether you take Uber, whether you take Empower in New York, if you guys have heard of that company, it's really about, can I get to point A to point B? How quickly can I do it? How fast can I do it? That's what the consumer cares about, and they need to do it safely. The assumption is safety. And I think that those are the things that, like, ultimately taking a robotaxi is as much about the experience of being in the robotaxi versus being in the experience of a driver with a car. I don't think the user is going to care as much as you think they are.
Just to piggyback on that, I think that's so smart and right. And I think that as the industry gets to maturity, that we all hope that we're not competing on safety, right? That is, as you said, the assumption. And then you're competing on experience, on price, on convenience, right? Which is great. And now there's a lot of other types of services, not just AVs, to your point, and you're just a part of this marketplace that, you know, frankly, is very safe and has proven to be very safe, especially in those places where, you know, we really do see injuries from crashes, or like in cities when people are speeding, when people aren't adhering to rules. Like, those are the stuff that is just bread and butter for AVs, and isn't already increasing safety. But yeah, I think you're right. It's going to come down to that, and that's a hopeful place to be, right? You shouldn't be competing on safety.
Well, I think we're coming up on time, but very quickly, from each of our panelists, can you give us a projection 2 years out, what you anticipate in terms of the proliferation of robots for logistic and other operations and robotaxi? Aaron, you want to start?
Hard to say or what to see in the coming years, but I definitely can see some solid result, meaning we are preparing our production to minimum 3,000 units per year. So hopefully we can do more use cases together. And for that, I'm really looking for some more partnerships and integration partners or policymakers, identifying the areas, then we are here to just work it out. So it really depends on the collaboration and partnership, I think.
John, you?
Yeah, I would say robo-taxis specifically will likely be pretty mainstream in most large urban environments, but will still be slow in deploying in suburban and rural areas where they're needed. I think in terms of autonomous driving in general, whether it's from the OEMs or the tier ones, I think we still have a little bit of a ways to go, but my strong hope is that in 2 years, underserved communities, rural areas, we need to be democratizing these services for everyone, not just LA, San Francisco, Miami, Atlanta, et cetera.
I think two things. One is that I think, like, political pushback, like the slow, like what just happened with Waymo in New York, and like stopping testing. I think that is something the industry is going to have to compete on, and I think that might slow rollouts because of fear of labor. And I think the second thing I would be very excited to see is to see the Zooxes and the Waymos of the world really bring back the idea of shared rides. So it's not about just having more cars, right? It's just about the idea that you're like, Uber Pool and stuff, like, back in the day, like very, very popular services, lower the cost for users, put less cars on the road, and having multi-stops. I think that's the type of thing that I would really love to see the industry move towards, because it's built for it in some ways, right? Or at least I would hope so. And so it's not about more cars, but it's about cars efficiently used.
Pat, from CPUC's view?
I joined the commission right when Uber was started in California. And so if there's anything I have learned in the last 13 years is that human innovation and creativity will take it where you do not expect. And every single new program and or framework that has been established has not anticipated the new business partnerships and models that the TNCs and the AVs and the transportation companies have then figured out a new way to interpret and to monetize those services. And so I can't even think to predict that. However, I will predict that the technology and the safety is going to increase over time. and that overall, it's an exciting time, and I'm really glad to be in it.
And where's Zoox in 2 years?
The only way people will get around in every city in the world is a Zoox in 2 years. No, I think we're really excited about scaling. The cities we've been public about: San Francisco, Vegas, LA, Atlanta, Austin, Miami, all really exciting. I think we'll be at scale there, providing really high quality, fun, safe rides to people in those markets, and then looking to scale across the U.S. and really having our manufacturing humming. So it's exciting.
Well, thank you for your attention. I think we're a few minutes over, but can we have a hand for our terrific panel?